You'll always be off the rack, Cynthia. What Adele didn't know about her own shares until she answered to me at the showroom opening. The champagne flute is still in Adele's hand when she says it, loud enough for the caterers to hear, loud enough for the 12 people nearest the buffet to turn. Bless your heart, honey. You can put on all the Rourke silk you want. You'll always be off the rack. The room laughs, that soft, obedient family laugh, and the sound of it lands somewhere under my ribs like a coin dropped down a well. I can smell the lilies she ordered by the case, 40 stems of them, sweet and funeral heavy, and under that, the wax of the candles nobody needed at 2 in the afternoon. My husband has been in the ground for 19 days. My hand is on the strap of my bag, and inside that bag is my mother's silk scarf, folded into a square the size of a playing card, the only thing in the room that is actually mine. Adele lifted her flute an inch, like a toast. Off the rack, she said again, tasting it. She had no idea she was toasting me. Because the woman she was mocking across the buffet table already held every share of the company she thought she owned, and Adele would not learn that for another 7 weeks. She thought I was a guest at her table. She had it backwards. She was standing in my house and didn't know it yet. Let me take you back, though, because a wound like that needs its whole history to make sense. I grew up in Cleveland, Tennessee, 30 miles up Highway 11 from Chattanooga, in a rented duplex with a porch light that flickered every time the refrigerator kicked on. My mother, Rosalind, took in alterations. That's the whole of it. She made other women's clothes fit their bodies. Hems, darts, a bridesmaid dress let out 2 sizes the night before a wedding. She worked on a 1974 Singer she'd bought secondhand for $60, and she kept a scarf pinned near the machine. Deep teal Italian silk, hand-rolled edges, a print of small gold keys. She'd bought it for herself at an estate sale for $4 because, she said, a woman who touches beautiful things all day should own one beautiful thing. When she died in 2009, that scarf and $2,300 in a credit union account were what she left me. I kept the scarf. I have kept it every day since. I learned fabric the way other kids learn to ride a bike, without noticing I was learning. By 19, I could tell a $9 blend from a $90 weave with my eyes closed, by the sound it made sliding off a bolt. I put myself through 2 years at Chattanooga State studying textile merchandising, worked the floor at a boutique on Fraser Avenue, and by 26, I was a buyer. Not glamorous. I drove a Corolla with 130,000 miles on it, and I ate a lot of gas station taquitos. But I understood one thing most people in fashion never do. I understood the math under the beauty. Margin, sell-through, the exact week a linen shirt stops being full price and starts being a markdown. I could look at a rack and tell you what it earned. I met Daniel Rourke in the spring of 2012 at a supplier show in Atlanta. He was carrying a garment bag and looking for the menswear hall. Lost, and I redirected him. He was the son of Rourke Atelier, a Chattanooga label his father, Warren Rourke, had built from a single tailoring shop in 1981 into a real Southern fashion house, doing about $14 million a year in wholesale and a small, adored retail line. Daniel didn't lead with any of that. He led with a bad joke about lapels. We got coffee. We got married in 2014 in a courthouse with his father grinning in the front row and his mother, Adele, arriving 40 minutes late in a car that wouldn't start on the first try, wearing sunglasses indoors. Warren I loved from the first handshake. He had ink-stained fingers and a way of holding cloth up to the light with 2 hands, like it might tell him something. He was the one who noticed what I actually was. 6 months into knowing me, he pulled a bolt of charcoal wool off a shelf and said, "Cynthia, what's wrong with this?" And I told him. The twist in the yarn was off. It would pill by the 2nd season. And he laughed so hard he had to sit down. From then on, he'd bring me the numbers nobody else in the family wanted to look at. Adele called that playing with the accountant. Warren called it the only person in this family who reads the whole spreadsheet. Adele was another kind of person entirely. Adele had married up and never forgot the climb, which made her merciless about anyone she suspected of climbing behind her. She'd been a fit model in Atlanta in the 80s for about 3 years, and she wore those 3 years like a crown for the next 40. Everything about me was a threat she dressed up as a joke. The first Thanksgiving, 2014, she sat me at the corner of the table beside the 8-year-old and announced to the room that she'd found my dress at the outlet mall. Isn't that resourceful? It was a $40 dress. She was right about that. She was not right about what it meant. I want to be fair to the early years because they were, in stretches, genuinely good. Daniel and I had a small brick house in St. Elmo with a lemon tree that never fruited and a stuck kitchen drawer we never fixed in 9 years of marriage. Warren started inviting me into the business sideways, asking me to look at a licensing deal, a fabric contract, a lease. By 2017, I wasn't just his daughter-in-law. I was the person he called before he signed anything. I never took a title. I never took a salary from Rourke Atelier. I want you to hear that clearly because it becomes important. I worked for that company for years and never once appeared on a payroll, never once held a business card that said my name. I stayed invisible on purpose. My mother taught me that. A good alteration, she said, is the one nobody sees. The erosion was slow. It always is. The first real note came at Warren's 70th birthday, 2018, at the country club off Lookout Mountain. I'd helped plan it. I'd found the $180 bottle of Barolo he loved and hidden it under the table for the toast. Adele stood up, tapped her glass, thanked everyone who made this happen, and named the caterer, the florist, and her hairdresser. Not me. Warren caught my eye across the table and mouthed, "Thank you." And I smiled, and I filed it. I have a place where I put things. It is not a place of anger. It is more like inventory. The second note, 2019. Rourke Atelier was opening a pop-up in Nashville, and I'd done the entire financial model. The rent, the staffing, the break-even at 61 days. At the ribbon cutting, a reporter from the Nashville Post asked who'd built the numbers, and Adele stepped smoothly in front of me and said, "Oh, we have people for that." We have people for that. I was standing 8 inches to her left. She didn't gesture. She let me be furniture. The third note cut deeper because it used Daniel. Christmas 2020. Adele gave everyone monogrammed robes, real ones, Rourke silk, $320 retail, initials embroidered in gold. Everyone got their real initials. Mine said CR, which are, of course, my initials, Cynthia Rourke, except the R was stitched in a different, cheaper thread, a flat rayon against everyone else's lustrous silk. You would only notice if you knew thread. I knew thread. She watched me open it. She wanted me to know. She wanted me to know she'd gone to the trouble of ordering one letter in a lesser material so that I would be a Rourke in name and off the rack in fact, forever, in gold, on my own body. I said thank you. I folded it. I put it in the drawer that stuck. The fourth note was the one Warren saw. It was the fall showcase of 2021, the big one, in the old Loveman's building downtown. Warren was slowing down by then. A heart thing, stents, a pill organizer the size of a tackle box. He'd started saying things to me quietly in the fabric room that I didn't fully weigh at the time. "You're the one who gets it, Cynthia." Adele can sell a dress. She can't read a balance sheet to save her life. I'm making some changes to how this is all set up. Priscilla's handling it. Priscilla Okafor was his corporate attorney, a sharp, unhurried woman out of a firm on Market Street, the kind of lawyer who says less than she knows. I thought he meant a will. I didn't ask. You don't ask a man with a tackle box of pills to explain his estate. You just love him. At that 2021 showcase, Adele introduced me to a buyer from Dillard's as Daniel's wife. She does something with, what is it, receipts? And laughed. And Warren, who was sitting down because standing tired him, said in a voice that cut the whole cluster of them into silence, "She does something with the truth, Adele. You should try it." Nobody laughed. Adele's face went the color of raw silk, and Warren looked at me and, very slightly, tipped his head, the way he did over a good bolt of wool. I have held on to that tip of the head for 4 years. Warren died in March of 2022. Heart. Fast, at least. Fast is the only mercy in that. And Daniel, my Daniel, died 14 months later in May of 2023. Not slow either. A truck ran a red light at the corner of Broad and 20th at 6:40 on a Tuesday evening while he was driving home with takeout. Kung Pao chicken, the report said. I have never been able to smell that dish since. I was 39 years old, and I had buried the 2 men who saw me. Which brings us back to the lilies, and the champagne, and Adele. 19 days after I buried my husband, Adele hosted what she called a celebration of Daniel's life at her house on Signal Mountain, and turned it, in front of 90 people, into a coronation of herself. She stood by the buffet in head-to-toe Rourke charcoal, and she informed the room, gently, warmly, the way a knife goes in warm, that the family had decided it was time to protect the legacy, which meant, in plain English, cutting me out. No role, no shares, she believed. A generous offer to help me get resettled, by which she meant a check to go away. You understand, honey, she said, tilting her flute toward me. The business stays in the family. Real Rourkes, not, and here came the smile, not off the rack. The lilies, the wax, the obedient laugh. My hand on my bag, and inside it, my mother's teal scarf with the little gold keys, folded to a square. I didn't cry. Something quieter happened. A click, like the last number on a lock landing home. I drove down the mountain in the dark, the porch lights of Signal winking out behind me one by one, and I didn't feel grief in that moment, though God knows it came later in waves that put me on the floor. In that moment, I felt a strange, clean stillness, because I knew something Adele did not. I'd known it for 11 months, since Priscilla Okafor called me into her office on Market Street the week after Warren's funeral, slid a folder across the desk, and said the sentence that rearranged my life. Here it is, in plain English, the way I promised I'd give it to you. Warren Rourke did not leave his shares to his son. He did not leave them to his wife. In November of 2021, the same season he told Adele she should try the truth, Warren quietly transferred 100% of the voting stock of Rourke Atelier, Inc. into a trust and named the sole beneficiary and successor trustee of that trust as me. Not Daniel, me. He'd watched Adele run the family like a runway for 3 decades, and he'd watched Daniel love her too much to ever stand against her, and he made a cold, clear-eyed decision that the only hands he trusted with the thing he'd built for 41 years were the hands that could read the whole spreadsheet. I owned the company. All of it. Every share Adele believed she was defending, I already held. When Daniel was alive, I'd told no one, because it would have torn him in half between his mother and his wife, and I loved him more than I loved being right. So I sat on it. For 14 months while my husband was alive, I sat on the single most powerful fact in that family, and I let Adele condescend to me at every dinner, because using it would have cost Daniel something, and Daniel was worth more to me than Adele's face going pale. But Daniel was gone, and 19 days after I buried him, Adele raised a glass of my company's success and called me off the rack in front of 90 people. So the next morning, I made one phone call. Priscilla, I said, it's Cynthia. I'd like to schedule the annual shareholder meeting. There was a pause, and then, in that unhurried voice, she said, I've had the paperwork ready for 11 months, Cynthia. Warren told me you'd know when. I heard her chair creak. What's the timeline? There's a showroom opening, I said. Adele's been planning it for a year. The new flagship on the south side. Ribbons in 7 weeks. You want to do it there. I want to do it there. I will not pretend the next 7 weeks were cold rage and clean lines. Some nights I sat on the floor of the St. Elmo house with Daniel's shirts pulled out of the closet, breathing them, while the radio in the kitchen played to nobody because I couldn't stand the silence. Grief is not tidy, and revenge did not make it tidy. But grief and preparation can live in the same body, and mine did. Here is what I did, and none of it was violence, and all of it was patient. First, I learned the exact shape of what I owned, which took Priscilla and me 3 sessions and a lot of coffee neither of us finished. Rourke Atelier Inc., 1 class of voting stock, 1,000 shares, all 1,000 held by the Warren Rourke Trust, of which I was sole trustee and beneficiary. Adele held a title, Creative Director, annual comp $410,000, and a board seat, but not a single share. She had run the place for years on the assumption that blood and volume equaled control. Neither is on a stock ledger. Second, I read 4 years of the company's actual books, the ones Adele signed off on, but never truly read. And there, folded into the marketing and brand development line, I found it. Because a woman who thinks the money is hers gets careless. Between 2022 and 2024, Adele had run roughly $680,000 of personal spending through the company. The Signal Mountain Landscaping, a leased Range Rover, a brand ambassador who was her tennis partner and did no ambassading, a $58,000 location scouting trip to Lake Como that scouted no locations. I didn't need any of it to win. I owned the votes outright. But I had it. I put it in the folder. Inventory. Third, and this mattered most to me, I found my allies, and I want to tell you about them because they are not tools, and I will not describe them like tools. Milo Vance was Rourke Atelier's head designer, 44, hired by Warren in 2008, the man who actually cut the clothes the family took credit for. Adele had spent years taking his ideas into meetings as her own and his budget down every fiscal year. Milo had a workroom in the back of the South Side building that smelled of steam and chalk, and a habit of humming old Motown while he pinned. I went to him in the 4th week, not as an owner, he didn't know yet, but as Daniel's widow, and I asked him one question. If you could build the fall line without anyone editing you, what would it be? He looked at me for a long moment, and then he pulled a portfolio out from under his cutting table, a whole collection, drawn and swatched, that Adele had killed in 2023 for being too quiet, no logos. It was the most beautiful work I'd seen come out of that house in a decade. Restrained, confident, my mother would have wept over the seams. She said nobody wants clothes that don't shout, Milo told me, and rolled it back up like a man used to losing. I keep it in case anybody ever asks. I'm asking, I said. He didn't understand yet. He would. There was one more. Her name was Deborah Kell, and she'd been Warren's, and then Adele's, executive assistant for 22 years, the woman who booked the Lake Como trip and knew it scouted nothing. The woman who'd watched Adele reorder my monogrammed R into cheap thread and say nothing because saying something cost your job. Deborah came to me on her own 2 weeks before the opening in the parking lot of a Publix and handed me a manila envelope and said only, Warren was good to me. She wasn't. Somebody should have the real calendar. Inside were 4 years of expense approvals with Adele's signature. My conscience witness. I have never forgotten that she chose the parking lot of a grocery store, wet socks from the rain, to do the brave thing quietly. That's what courage usually looks like. It's rarely on a stage. Fourth, Priscilla and I did the boring, lethal, procedural work. Notice of the annual shareholders meeting, mailed to every director of record, Adele included, on legal letterhead 21 days in advance, exactly as the bylaws required. Adele got hers. I know she got hers because Deborah told me later that Adele had waved it at her and laughed and said, "Some formality from the lawyer. Toss it in the folder." She thought it was noise. She thought I was a guest at her table. The showroom opening was set for October 14th, 2024, 6 in the evening, at the new 8,000-square-foot Rourke flagship on Main Street in Chattanooga's South Side. Adele had spent, of the company's money, about $220,000 on that party. String quartet, a step and repeat with her name 3 sizes larger than the labels, 200 guests, buyers, press, the mayor's office, the whole Southern fashion circuit she'd spent 40 years courting. She was going to stand in the middle of my building and announce the new era of Rourke Atelier under her sole vision. I let her plan every inch of it. I paid for it, technically, and I let her plan it, because I understood something Adele never learned in 3 years of fit modeling. The higher the stage you build for yourself, the farther the fall. I wore black. Not Rourke black, a plain sheath I'd bought years ago. And around my throat, for the first time in public, I wore my mother's teal silk scarf with the little gold keys, hand-rolled edges, $4 at an estate sale in 2003. I tied it the way Rosalind tied it, the knot to the side. I looked at myself in the mirror of the St. Elmo house, the stuck drawer half open behind me, and I heard my mother say, "A woman who touches beautiful things all day should own one beautiful thing." I owned more than one now, but I only needed the scarf. The showroom was radiant when I walked in at 6:20. Milo's clothes, my clothes now, hung on the racks under warm light, quiet and confident, no logos shouting. The quartet was playing something by Ravel. Adele stood at the center in Rourke charcoal, holding court and a glass of Krug, and when she saw me, she did a thing I'll remember with real pleasure. She smiled the buffet smile, the warm knife smile, and she said, loud enough for the buyers beside her, "Cynthia, you came, and you wore a scarf from— where is that from, honey? A flea market?" "An estate sale," I said. "It was my mother's." "How sweet," she said, and turned her back. At 6:45, Priscilla Okafor stepped to the small riser Adele had built for her own speech, tapped the microphone twice, and said in her unhurried voice, "Ladies and gentlemen, before the remarks, the annual shareholders meeting of Rourke Atelier Incorporated is now called to order. As noticed to all directors on the 23rd of September, per the bylaws, Article 4. The quartet stopped. 200 people went quiet in that particular way a room goes quiet when it senses something real is happening under the party. Adele laughed, bright and confused. "Priscilla, sweetheart, this is a celebration. We don't need to—" "The meeting is properly noticed, and there is a quorum," Priscilla said, not unkindly, the way you'd tell someone their slip is showing. "In fact, there is 100% of the voting stock present." She looked up. "Held by a single shareholder." I watched Adele's face. I want to describe it precisely because I earned the right to. First, confusion, the eyebrows. Then the search of the room for Daniel, for Warren, for whichever man was supposed to be holding the thing she assumed was hers, and the small stagger of remembering that both of them were dead. Then, as Priscilla said the next words, the color left her face from the top down, like water draining out of silk when you finally admit the stain won't come out. "The sole shareholder of Rourke Atelier is the Warren Rourke Trust," Priscilla said. "Sole trustee and beneficiary, Cynthia Rourke. Mr. Rourke transferred 100% of the voting stock into that trust in November 2021. It has been in effect ever since." A pause. "Mrs. Adele Rourke holds no shares. She never has." I stepped up onto Adele's little riser. My hand went to my mother's scarf, the knot at the side, the way you touch something to make sure it's still there. "Hi, Adele," I said quietly, and the microphone carried it to 200 people. "I'm calling the vote." She reached for me, not to hurt me, to hold on to something. "Cynthia, honey, there's been a mistake. This is— Warren wouldn't—" "Warren did," I said, "in the fabric room, in November of 2021. The same fall you introduced me as the woman who does something with receipts." I turned to the room because the room mattered. The buyers, the press, the mayor's office, all the people who'd watched me be furniture for 10 years. As sole shareholder, I'm exercising my rights under the bylaws. Item 1, the removal of the current creative director for cause. Priscilla laid the manila folder open on the podium. Deborah's 4 years of signatures, the $58,000 Como trip, the $680,000. I didn't read it out. I didn't have to. I just let it sit there, open, under the warm light, in front of the very press Adele had invited to worship her. There's cause, I said. It's documented. I'd rather not spend your evening on it, but it's here, and it's real, and every buyer in this room can see it if they'd like. Adele made a sound then, not words, a small, cracked, involuntary sound, the sound of 40 years of a mask coming off all at once. Her glass of Krug was shaking. She set it down before it could fall, and I watched the woman who'd called me off the rack in front of my husband's mourners understand, fully, in her body, that she was standing in my building, spending my money, in front of the people whose respect she'd traded her whole self for, and that all of it, every share, every wall, every logo, answered to me. Item 2, I said, the appointment of a new head of design, effective tonight. I found Milo in the crowd, near the racks of the collection Adele had killed. Milo Vance? Milo's mouth opened. He put a hand on the nearest rack, his own quiet, confident, unlogoed clothes, to steady himself. The room, which had watched him carry this house on his back for 16 years, began, one pair of hands at a time, to applaud. It built. It became the loudest thing in the building. And here is where the story could have ended in blood. I want to be honest about how close it came and how much I wanted it. I had the folder. I had the votes. I could have had Adele walked out by security in front of the mayor's office, criminally referred by Christmas, stripped of the Signal Mountain house that the company technically held the note on, left with nothing but the 3 years of fit modeling and 40 years of a lie. I had every card. She had answered to me the moment Priscilla said her name. I could have ended her, publicly, completely, and no one in that room would have lifted a finger to stop me. I looked at her, and the thing that stopped me was not softness. It was that the mask was actually, finally, off, and what was under it was not a queen. It was a frightened woman of 73 who had learned decades ago, in some room I never saw, that if she didn't stand on someone, she'd fall, and had never once been made to stand on the truth instead. She was crying, real tears, not performance, the ugly kind, her hand pressed over her mouth. And she said, into the microphone she didn't know was still live, so quietly, "Warren didn't trust me. He didn't trust me, and he was right not to. I've been horrible to you. I've been horrible to everyone. I don't know how to be anything else." That's the difference between fear and remorse. Fear says, "Save me." She didn't say, "Save me." She said, "He was right not to." That's a person breaking, not a person bargaining. So I made a choice, and I made it on my terms, in daylight, in front of everyone, where boundaries actually hold. "Adele," I said. I stepped down off the riser so we were level, and I lowered my voice, though the mic still caught it. "You're removed as creative director tonight. That's not negotiable, and it's the last thing about this company you'll ever decide. The Como trip and the rest, you'll repay it on a schedule Priscilla will send you, and you'll keep the Signal Mountain house because Daniel grew up in it, and I won't be the reason you lose it. You'll come to Sunday dinners if you want to come. You'll be Daniel's mother and Warren's widow, and those are true, and they're yours, and no one's taking them. But you will never again introduce me as anything less than what I am, in this room or any other. Not because I'll punish you, because I'll be gone the first time you do, and you know now that I mean the things I say." I let that land. "That's the offer. It's more than you gave me. Take it or don't." She took my hand, both of hers around it, inkless, shaking. the way Warren used to hold cloth up to the light. "I'll take it," she whispered. "Cynthia, I'll take it." I believed her about as far as I could see her, which is the only honest way to forgive anyone. But I let the bond survive, not because she earned it cheaply. She didn't earn it at all, because I decided it would. And it survives on my say-so, and she knows it, and that knowing is its own quiet fence. That was 21 months ago. Work Atelier did $19 million last year, the best in its history, on Milo's quiet collection, the one Adele swore nobody wanted. Turns out people are starving for clothes that don't shout. We opened a second showroom in Nashville in March. Deborah Kell runs my office now, at 3 times what Adele used to pay her, and she still books the calendar. But these days, everything on it is real. Priscilla and I have dinner once a month, and she still says less than she knows, and I love her for it. Adele comes to Sunday dinner most weeks. She is smaller now and quieter, and once, only once, she started to make a comment at the table about my dress, the old reflex, and she stopped herself halfway, her fork in the air, and she looked at me and said, "It's lovely, actually. Where's it from?" And I said, "Milo made it." And she nodded and ate her green beans, and that was the whole war. Ended over green beans, on my terms, in the light. This morning I drove down to the South Side showroom early, before the staff, before the quartet of a normal Tuesday, which is just the HVAC and Milo humming Motown in the back. The racks held the spring line. My mother's teal silk scarf with the little gold keys was in my bag, folded to a square the size of a playing card, the way it's ridden with me for 23 years. The board had voted the week before. There's a nameplate now on the corner office that used to be Warren's, then Adele's imaginary throne. My name is on it. And there's a title under my name, the one Warren left me and I finally took. Chairman and owner, Rourke Atelier. I stood in the middle of my 8,000 square feet in the early light. I took the scarf out. I shook it loose, and it caught the sun, teal and gold, the hand-rolled edges my mother rolled by hand at a $60 Singer. I tied it at my throat, the knot to the side, the way Rosalind tied it, the way I tied it the night I called the vote. Then I walked to the head of the showroom that was mine, and I opened the doors.